all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis 8. You bigot. Why freedom of thought and speech are policed by tyrannical leftists. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. You bigot. A field guide for men who still notice reality. The summa-carceral shakedown. How academic hags rebrand female neurosis as extraction to obscure the biological reality that men are the resource being harvested to fund a lavender-scented cult of victimhood. I read Dr. Wynona's manifesto on the tyranny of herbal tea so you don't have to subject your prefrontal cortex to the linguistic torture of a Marxist who believes a chamomile sachet is a tool of patriarchal oppression. It is a masterpiece of projection, a cacophony of resentful noise designed to obscure a simple biological reality. The extraction she describes is merely the feminine imperative demanding resources without the reciprocal duty of production. She invents a term, summa-carceral extraction, which sounds like a diagnosis from a gynecologist who failed Latin, to describe the horror of being a white woman in an air-conditioned office with free beverages. This is the gamma bias in its purest form, the amplification of female neuroticism into a moral emergency, while the literal blood price of civilization, the 92% of workplace fatalities that are men, is flushed down the memory hole. Applying the trivium to this trash reveals the good doctor operates entirely on feeling as truth, bypassing the grammar and logic stages to arrive at a conclusion that flatters her satius as a victim. She claims institutions extract care. I contend she is projecting the parasitic nature of the left onto the host. While she complains about the emotional availability of marketing assistants, the real extraction happening in the West is the genocentric siphoning of male utility. Who pays for the welfare state? Men. Who loses their children in 80% of contested custody battles? Fathers, who are the silent victims of the 30% non-paternity rate, unwittingly investing in another man's genetic legacy while being told they are toxic. Men. This writer isn't describing capitalism. She is describing the anxiety of a parasite that fears the host might wake up and check the accounts. We are told that care is undervalued because the market does not pay a living wage for changing diapers. This is an economic lie rooted in epistemic gating. The market values scarcity and risk, not sentiment. A daycare worker is paid less than an underwater welder, not because society hates children, but because the supply of people willing to hug toddlers is high. While the supply of men willing to dive into the dark to weld explosive pipes is low, and because if the welder fails, he dies. This writer looks at the Western canon with its apprenticeship mastery ladders, its stoicism, its pursuit of the transcendentals, and sees only a conspiracy to harm her. She is an NPC in the truest sense, running a recursive loop of asymmetric satire. She is virtuous, inflated meaning. Her tea is politics and self-sealing immunity. Your disagreement is proof of your bigotry. We are going to dismantle this lie syllogism by syllogism and restore your mind to the natural law that built the very roof over her ungrateful head.
Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. Your pain is their profit. Your care is their theft. The trade show of your soul. By Dr. Winona, feminist Marxist, PhD. Last month, I attended a corporate wellness trade show, a cathedral of instrumentalized self-care where capitalism devour its own tail. Booth after booth offered the same bargain. Herbal tea sachets promising inner peace, hormonal balance, and stress relief. The irony hung thick enough to taste. These wellness merchants, predominantly white women selling to other white women, had built an industry on harvesting the very distress their economic system manufactures. I watched a young marketing assistant, herself compensated in exposure and networking opportunities, explain how her company's lavender chamomile blend would restore what the modern world takes from you. What it takes from you, darling, is your unpaid labor, your emotional availability, your body as a site of surveillance and optimization, and you're being paid in tea. This is somacarceral extraction, the process by which institutions harvest care labor while imposing body surveillance regimes that pathologize the distress they themselves create. The herbal tea sachet is not self-care, it is hush money, the fear that governs us. Every institution you trust has abandoned principle for fear management, not fear of harm, fear of accountability. I have watched university administrations, corporate HR departments, and healthcare systems operate with identical logic. They fear the whistleblower more than the harm being exposed. This is not cowardice, it is architecture. Consider the feedback loops embedded in every modern institution. Employee engagement surveys, patient satisfaction scores, student evaluations. These appear democratic, your voice matters, but function as surveillance mechanisms. Each data point you provide becomes evidence of your compliance or your danger. The employee who rates their burnout honestly becomes disengaged. The patient who complains about rushed care becomes difficult. The student who challenges the curriculum becomes a retention risk. The institution has no interest in your feedback. It has interest in your predictability. At that trade show, I asked the herbal tea vendor whether her company offered healthcare to its production workers. The women, always women, predominantly brown and immigrant, who harvested and processed her wellness ingredients. She blinked. The feedback loop closed. My question was not the compliant data point the system required. The body as battleground. Body surveillance culture operates through what I term regimented vulnerability. You must be vulnerable enough to purchase solutions, but never so vulnerable as to demand structural change. The herbal tea industry alone generates $3.5 billion annually by converting your legitimate distress at capitalism into a consumption habit. The trade show floor was thick with wellness experts performing elaborate rituals of self-care, while their own bodies betrayed them. Eye twitches, nervous laughter, the 1,000 microsignals of burnout they'd been trained to monetize rather than resist. Your body knows it is being harvested. The question is whether you'll interpret its signals as an indictment of the system or a personal failure requiring more products. The caregiving crisis is not an accident. Let us speak plainly about why caregiving remains undervalued labor. It threatens the extraction economy. When one human genuinely tends to another without metrics, without optimization, without the mediation of market transactions, they model a relationship to human flourishing that capitalism cannot capture. This is why the predominantly female workforce of caregivers, nurses, teachers, and domestic workers earns poverty wages, while their emotional labor subsidizes entire industries. The herbal tea sachet is merely the most literal expression of this theft. Some woman somewhere grew that lavender, some woman harvested it, some woman sorted, dried, and packaged it. Some woman will brew it for you when you're too exhausted to care for yourself. At no point in this chain was care treated as anything but a resource to extract. And when you, exhausted and overworked, reach for that sachet, you participate in the loop. Your care for yourself is channeled through the market. Your distress becomes revenue. Your healing becomes someone else's unpaid labor. Breaking the extraction cycle. I am not suggesting you stop drinking tea. I am suggesting you recognize the somacarceral extraction operating in every institution you encounter. Your workplace does not want you well. It wants you functional. Your healthcare system does not want you healthy. It wants you compliant. Your university does not want you educated. It wants you credentialed. The feedback loops are designed to extract maximum utility while providing minimum restoration. The solution is not better self-care products. The solution is care as resistance. When you genuinely tend to someone, your child, your parent, your neighbor, your comrade, without market mediation, you commit an act of economic sedition. When you reject the body surveillance regime and refuse to pathologize your distress, you deny the system the data it requires to manage you. When you name somacarceral extraction, you make it visible. The herbal tea trade show will continue. The feedback loops will tighten, the institutions will fear, but you now have language for what is being done to you. Use it. Your pain is their profit. Your care is their theft. The first act of liberation is refusing to convert one into the other. The resentful alchemy of somacarceral newspeak. The Roman poet Juvenal famously asked who watches the watchman, but in our somacarceral hellscape of academic grift, the better question is, who audits the neologisms? When Dr. Winona, feminist Marxist, deploys somacarceral extraction, a term so aggressively polysyllabic it sounds like a Dungeons & Dragons spell cast by a victim studies major, you are not witnessing scholarship. You are watching a linguistic false flag operation designed to gatekeep epistemic access. This is the asymmetry of knowledge in action, by inventing a term that requires a 3-semester syllabus to decode. The leftist priesthood grants themselves immunity from standard linguistic critique while claiming the status of enlightenment. The word somacarceral merges soma, body, and carceral, prison, suggesting your body is a prison because someone sold you chamomile tea. This is not analysis, it is thesaurus abuse. The trivium, the foundation of Western education comprising grammar, logic, and rhetoric, demands that language clarify reality, not obscure it behind a fog of pseudo-Marxist mysticism. When you hear somacarceral, reach for your dictionary, then your pistol, because the term exists solely to pathologize voluntary exchange as violence. Consider the rhetoric of say-essis manipulation when the good doctor describes a young marketing assistant, compensated in exposure and networking opportunities, a vivid frame designed to invoke your feeling of injustice, while obscuring the meaning of voluntary labor. Is this woman a slave? No, she is an apprentice on the mastery ladder, trading present wages for future human capital. A tradition stretching back to the guilds of medieval Florence, which built the cathedrals that Marxist deconstructionists now use to lecture us on oppression. The writer frames her simultaneously as victim of unpaid labor and perpetrator of hush money, a double bind that grants the narrator unilateral power. She is the savior, you are the dupe. And the woman selling tea is both oppressor and oppressed, depending on the sentence's grammatical needs. This is the recursive loop of gamma bias. Female agency is erased to maximize victim status, while male agency is amplified to assign sanction. The focus on herbal tea as a symbol of extraction is perhaps the most luxurious display of first-world narcissism ever committed to bandwidth. We live in a civilization so abundant, so precisely engineered by the mixed constitution of market mechanics and subsidiarity, that the gravest existential threat to this PhD's well-being is the availability of lavender sachets. She writes, "The herbal tea sachet is not self-care, it is hush money." A statement that could only be typed on a laptop built by male labor, powered by a grid maintained by male labor, in a room warmed by infrastructure built by male labor. This is the empathy gap weaponized. Your disposability is invisible, while her trivial dissatisfaction is elevated to a moral emergency requiring a new political theology. The somacarceral framework is a luxury good, an intellectual bauble for those who have never carried a roof tile in the August sun, never worked a 12-hour shift on an oil rig to feed a family that the family courts will later deny them access to. This essay is a cathedral of victimhood constructed without a cornerstone of theological virtue. The transcendental's truth, goodness, beauty, have been ousted by the new leftist trinity. feeling as truth, status as goodness, and power as beauty. When she writes, "Your pain is their profit," she is recasting the Christian sacrament of communion into a cannibalistic rite where the host is your neurosis and the priest is a diversity consultant. This is Gnosticism for the unemployable. The material world is a prison, soma carceral, the body is a trap, and only the secret knowledge of critical theory can liberate your spark of consciousness. But unlike the ancient Gnostics who sought escape through asceticism, the modern Marxist seeks liberation through your wallet and your submission. The fallacy of the care economy reveals a profound economic illiteracy that would make Ludwig von Mises weep into his ledger. The author claims caregiving is undervalued because it threatens the extraction economy, ignoring the Austrian economic principle that value is subjective and determined by scarcity, not sentiment. The market pays engineers more than babysitters not because it hates children, but because competent engineers are scarcer than competent caregivers. This is natural law, not conspiracy. The meaning she ascribes to extraction is actually the price signal that allocates resources in a civil society association of free actors. When she demands carers' resistance, she is demanding the power to force others to value her emotional output at a price they did not agree to. This is theft masquerading as compassion. The most insidious aspect of this ideological possession is the projection of extraction onto the market when it is the leftist project itself that is the true parasite on the Western tradition. Schopenhauer observed that the feminine imperative operates through indirectness and the utilization of others' strength. The cultural Marxist narrative harvests female neuroticism, the feeling of being overwhelmed by a world they did not build and cannot maintain, and converts it into political sanction. The article is not a critique of capitalism. It is a resume for a bureaucratic position in the thought police, a demand for immunity from the natural consequences of one's own choices. The real soma carceral extraction is the divorce court system extracting wealth from men at gunpoint to fund the very academic departments that produce this drivel. Psychobabble concepts like regimented vulnerability act as vehicles to sneak infantile requirements into the domain of grown-ups. By labeling a withdrawal from the marketplace as economic sedition, the writer deconstructs the disciplined path of mastery necessary for adulthood, substituting it with a playground where emotions act as the sole medium of exchange. She pushes for a rejection of the body surveillance regime, a phrase masking a refusal to accept personal accountability and the natural consequences of the physical world. Such a framework eliminates impartial justice. Subjective agitation counts as damage. This damage imposes an obligation on others, and failing to meet that obligation triggers punishment. This creates a circular reasoning pattern, self-contained and authoritarian. This grotesque inversion is not an error of analysis, but a feature of the gynocentric operating system. The utility of the male is assumed as a fixed background constant, while the comfort of the female is elevated to a moral emergency to maintain the delusion that a tea sachet is a weapon of war. The leftist must engage in a total evasion of natural law, pretending that the abundance surrounding them is a default state of nature rather than a fragile artifact of male sacrifice. By reframing the surplus of civilization as extraction, they lay the intellectual groundwork for a parasitic dialectic of dependency that eats the seed corn of the West to feed the insatiable maw of care. The parasitism of the care economy, a case study in male disposability. The psychiatric definition of a delusion is a fixed false belief that conflicts with reality. But what do we call it when an entire intellectual class builds a worldview on the paranoid premise that a sachet of chamomile tea is a tool of patriarchal oppression? Dr. Winona, feminist Marxist, PhD, an academic specializing in the somber science of finding grievance in a rainstorm, recently wandered into a corporate wellness trade show and saw not commerce, but soma carceral extraction. To the red-pilled mind, this is merely the screeching of the 4 female riders converging at once. The empathy gap demands we validate her feelings as fact. Gamma bias magnifies a tea vendor's pitch into systemic violence. and the asymmetry of moral agency frames her as the passive victim of an aggressive world. While she weeps over the surveillance of employee engagement surveys, 97% of workplace fatalities are men who will never be surveyed about their stress levels, only scraped off the pavement when the job is done. This is the material reality of extraction. It is not your emotional availability being harvested for profit, darling. It is the coal from the mine, the fish from the sea, and the blood from the brow of men who build the very floor you stand on to decry the theft of your care. Consider the psychological projection inherent in her critique of the feedback loop. Dr. Wynona claims institutions use surveys to enforce predictability and punish the difficult truth teller. Yet it is precisely the leftist architectural imperative that utilizes recursive loops of status, sanction, and immunity to silence dissent. She frames the corporation's desire for efficiency as fear, but in the Western tradition of the apprenticeship mastery ladder, feedback was the essential mechanism of competence. A master did not coddle the apprentice's feelings, he corrected his error to ensure the wall did not collapse. Her objection is not to the mechanism of feedback, but to the substance of the reality it reveals, that her care economy produces nothing of tangible value. The true architecture of false consciousness is not the HR department fearing accountability, but the gynocentric social order fearing the exposure of female narcissism. She demands the sciasis of the moral superior, without the duty of the producer, utilizing the leftist tactic of inverting the burden of proof. She who feels the most aggrieved wins the debate, regardless of the objective data. The core of her manifesto is the seductive lie of care as resistance and economic sedition, which, when stripped of its postmodern glitter, is nothing more than a syllogistic demand for parasitism. Major premise: the care economy provides essential value that capitalism cannot capture. Minor premise: capitalism demands payment for goods, tea, healthcare, shelter. Conclusion: therefore men, the primary net taxpayers and builders of the infrastructure she inhabits, must provide these resources to women without the violence of market exchange or the surveillance of reciprocity. This is the evasion of natural law in its purest form. Nature operates on scarcity and hierarchy. The mixed constitution of civilization requires the logos, the masculine ordering principle, to allocate resources efficiently so that bio's life can flourish. By defining care as non-market labor that subsidizes industry, she admits that her mode of being requires a host. She is not the resistor. She is the pathogen confusing the immune system's response for the disease itself. Ultimately, the good doctor's rage is not about tea. It is a tantrum against the living spirit of Western civilization, which demands that authority be earned through responsibility. A concept alien to the modern leftist mindset possessed by the spirit of entitlement. Look closely at her hatred of instrumentalized self-care. She loathes the market because the market requires a transaction, and a transaction requires her to offer something of equal value, which threatens her unilateral power. She yearns for a pre-logical matriarchy where feeling as truth reigns supreme, where her distress is a check that the state-read male taxpayers must cash without question. But the Western canon from Aristotle to Schopenhauer warns us that a society built on sentiment rather than virtue is a ship without a rudder, destined to sink under the weight of its own care. We must reject this parasitism. We must embrace the trivium, the dialectic and the hard road of mastery, recognizing that true care is not the theft of another's labor, but the voluntary sacrifice of one's own strength in service of the good, the true, and the beautiful. Step into the light, gentlemen. You have just witnessed the autopsy of a lie, the dismantling of a linguistic Trojan horse designed to steal your sanity and your sovereignty. Doctor, feminist Marxist and her somacarceral inquisitors want you to believe that the universe pivots on the axis of female comfort, that your stoic endurance is oppression, and that the herbal tea trade is a greater tragedy than the male bodies buried in the mines to boil the water. But you know better now. You see the loop, the asymmetric status that grants them victimhood, the gated knowledge that diagnoses your descent as pathology, and the sanction that threatens your livelihood if you refuse to kneel. You have broken the spell of the 4 female riders, the empathy gap that ignores your suffering, the gamma bias that amplifies their distress, and the male disposability that treats your sacrifice as a natural resource to be extracted without thanks. Calculate the grim numbers behind this so-called compassionate female centrism they push. While the writer sobs over teabags and body watching, the actual machinery of the state crushes men. Witness the family court framework, where dads lose their children and property in 85% of disputed custody fights, turned into cash machines for the very women who say they are victims of extraction. Observe the suicide numbers, where men end their lives at nearly 4 times the rate of women, often after being silenced by therapy speak that calls their masculine drive to fix things a sickness rather than wallowing in victimhood. Consider the 30% non-paternity frequency in some groups, the ultimate taking where a male raises another's genetic child, a fraud enforced by social rules that ban him from asking for a DNA test. This is the real care economy, the transfer of male labor, resources, and lives to a system that hates them. Do not mistake their resistance for bravery. It is merely the tantrum of a spoiled child in a padded room built by men. They hate the market because the market is a harsh but honest teacher. It demands merit, it rewards scarcity, and it is blind to their hysterical feeling as truth. They hate the mixed constitution of the West because it stands as a monument to the very virtues they lack: courage, prudence, justice, and temperance. Their ideology is a cancer that turns the host against itself, convincing the NPC acolytes to dismantle the infrastructure that keeps them alive. They are not the resistance, they are the immune system gone haywire, attacking the body politic for the crime of existing. But you are free now. You have walked through the fire of their shaming language and emerged unburned, armed with the sword of dialectic and the shield of natural law. You know that your worth is not measured by how well you serve the feminine imperative, but by your adherence to the transcendentals, truth, goodness, and beauty. You know that a woman's care is often a transaction, and that love without loyalty is a lie. You are the rational man who sees the world as it is, not as the Marxist dreamers wish it to be. Go forth and spread this gospel. Share it with your brothers, your sons, and the men who are still trapped in the maze of guilt. You are the inheritors of a civilization that tamed the wilderness and touched the stars, and no amount of herbal tea or academic word salad can ever steal that from you. The truth has set you free. Now go make them hear it. And now the sponsored book introduction. You Bigot, Why Freedom of Thought and Speech Are Policed by Tyrannical Leftists. The guillotine of the modern era does not drop with a thud, it slides down with a smile. For years I watched as the culture around me warped into something unrecognizable, a grotesque theater where up is down, strength is pathology, and the biological imperatives that built every enduring civilization in history are mocked as artifacts of a dark age. Like you, I felt the suffocating pressure to apologize for my existence, to nod along while toxic ideologues dismantled the very foundations of logic and reality. I witnessed the marginalization of the father, the demonization of the masculine spirit, and the rise of a repressive tolerance designed solely to silence dissent. This was not a sudden revolution, but a slow, methodical subversion. A semantic minefield where words like equality and justice were stripped of their meaning and weaponized against anyone daring to uphold the natural order. Writing You Bigot was not a choice but a necessity, a forced counterattack against an enemy that has been winning only because good men have remained silent for too long. This volume serves as a strategic manual for the intellectual and spiritual warfare being waged against the Western tradition. We are facing a crisis of ontology, a fundamental break from the logos that orders the universe. The enemy has breached the walls of our institutions, utilizing the twisted logic of the Frankfurt School to infect the collective consciousness with a cognitive virus that paralyzes our ability to speak the truth. We will dissect this pathology, tracing the architecture of subversion from the academic lounges of cultural Marxists to the algorithms that police your thoughts today. We will examine the biological citadel, rejecting the lie that men and women are interchangeable cogs in a machine, and instead embracing the physiological and psychological realities that make distinct roles not only necessary but beautiful. The truth is not a social construct. It is a fortress, and within these pages you will find the masonry required to rebuild it. You are holding this book because you have likely felt the sting of the thought police, or found yourself navigating the semantic minefield of modern discourse. You are a man who values reason, who sees through the veneer of emotional labor and toxic masculinity to the misandrist core beneath. This work is specifically designed for the rational man, the spiritual seeker who looks at the ruins of the gynocentric matrix and knows, deep in his bones, that there is a better way. You are the inheritor of a tradition stretching back to the Stoics, the Church Fathers, and the architects of the Republic. You understand that freedom of speech is not a permission granted by the state, but a divine right endowed by the Creator. This book is your shield and your sword, offering a rigorous, uncompromising defense of the paternal instinct and the structural necessity of male leadership. If, however, you are a subscriber to the doctrines of critical theory, a fervent believer that equity trumps biology, or someone who finds comfort in the soft tyranny of the nanny state, put this book down. Walk away. Go find a safe space, curl up with a soothing narrative about the social construction of gender, and continue your slumber. There is nothing for you here but the cold, hard steel of facts and the uncomfortable glare of unvarnished reality. We do not traffic in the lived experience of professional victims or the labyrinth of postmodern nonsense. We deal in the currency of natural law, historical precedent, and the biological reality of the sexes. If you are looking for validation of your neo-Marxist programming, you will find only its systematic demolition. For the man who stays, prepare to have your intuition validated by syllogism and your spirit armed with the wisdom of the ages. We will walk through the fatherless wasteland to understand the cost of our cultural suicide, and we will ascend the biblical fortress to reconnect with the divine mandate of masculinity. You will discover why the repressive tolerance of the left is a trap designed to enslave you, and you will learn how to build the Stoic operating system necessary to withstand the psychological warfare of the current year. This is not merely a collection of essays, it is a call to spiritual arms. The inheritance reclaimed awaits those with the courage to seize it.
You Bigot, Why Freedom of Thought and Speech Are Policed by Tyrannical Leftists, written by Conrad Reicher. Buy now. Links in description.